We will wait for everyone to participate. So a few seconds and then we'll see the results. We still have people introducing themselves in the chat box, and it's amazing how diverse the group is in the room. So there is a balance, actually. There is yes and no response. This is fantastic. Okay, second question to know you more. Have you ever participated in the planning or organizing of a campaign? So campaigning. Have you ever participated in campaigning? Yes, you can also answer in the chat box if you're comfortable with. But the question will appear in a few seconds.
Sorry, I have some issues because people writing in the chat, so the button is not visible for me, so I have to wait until someone is not writing to open the question. So sorry for that.
Or we can ask you guys, all the attendees, to wait for the question to show in, and then you can press yes or no, if easier. It's going to inform the poll too.
Yeah, I can't do it. So if people could stop writing for a moment in the chat, then I can start the poll. I'm sorry, that's a weird thing from WebEx. Thank you.
No worries. Okay, next question. Have you ever participated in a protest, march, or demonstration? This is anonymous, so you are free to choose yes or no. We will wait a few more seconds to have everyone select their option. Yes, wow, we have a very active group. Plenty of activists. This is fantastic. Okay, final question. Have you ever funded or did any work related to grassroots peace building or activism, or do you currently have the ability to do so? If you have done any work when it comes to grassroots peace building or activism, or you're thinking of doing it in the future. It's also a yes and no question. Most people said yes. There are some people with no response, and few people said no. It makes sense since we've seen a lot of participation and representation from NGOs in the room. Thank you so much for participating in this poll. It definitely helps us know you guys and your background and your experiences. We will move to the next section of our webinar. And I would love to trigger some questions in your mind, especially one of the main questions that got us in this webinar today, which is, what does nonviolent action have to do with peace building? Sometimes when we hear two concepts such as peace building, nonviolent action, we don't think of them as two related things. So maybe they do. So what does nonviolent action have to do with peace building? This is a question that we ask you and invite you to think about throughout the whole webinar. And if you had any thoughts, you can drop them in the chat box all through the webinar duration, and then we will try to answer this question today. So stay tuned. I'll turn it over to Social for a very interactive and exciting exercise.
Thank you, Sabrine, and apologies. I was confused of where the mute button was. Hi, everyone. I am Xochitl. I work in Latin America with this amazing project. And for this exercise, first, I would like you to teletransport to Liberia, which is a country in the African continent. And some of you may know of the Liberia Mass Action for Peace campaign. So you can put into practice all that knowledge that you have. But for those of you that may not have known about the Liberia Mass Action for Peace, I can give you some background. For several years, there had been a lot of civil wars in Liberia between the government and armed rebel groups that were fighting to control the country. And that brought devastation and both to all the civilian population. So the exercise that we're going to introduce to you right now speaks about a particular moment in that conflict in the early 2000s when a series of events happened and a movement specifically arose and help resolve the conflict that the Liberians were facing. So I'm going to present to you now the exercise. Thank you, Nick. So for you, this exercise is a game, and it describes specific events that unfolded during this particular moment of the conflict that involve tactics and activities that a particular movement utilized since its formation, since it was formed, and also the activities that they implemented and the events that resulted from those activities. So first of all, you have 12 events. You have 12 pictures that each of them describe one event. If you put the pointer in one of the pictures, you're going to see what the event description is. After you have read all the different events, we are going to ask you to organize these 12 events in the chronological order that you think they unfolded. So this would be just an exercise to see what are the order in which these events took place. You can just put the pointer and then drag them to the number that you think describes the order in which the event unfolded. We invite you to read each of the events so you kind of get an idea of all the events and then you can organize them. We're going to give you 2 minutes to do this by yourselves. And then after the 2 minutes, after you have finished the exercise, we're going to break you into groups, and then we're going to ask you to share why you organize the events in the order in which you place them. So right now, Nick, my friend Nick, is going to share the link of the game in the chat box. Sure. Maybe while I am adding, yeah, thank you, Nick. So one of the participants is asking us to read each of the descriptions out loud. if that is helpful. If some of you feel free to go and in the link that we have shared in the chat box and start reading the events on your time and organize them. Also, let us know if you have any problem. But I can definitely read the events in the order in which the pictures are. So the first picture depicts women dressed in white with different signs, and it says Muslim and Christian women decide to work together for peace despite a history of interreligious tension. The next picture says Muslim and Christian women take off their jewelry, dressed in plain white clothes, and demonstrate in the streets of the capital city, Monrovia. And you can see women in the sky, with the sky as a background. The next one is the picture of the Liberian President Charles Taylor. And the event was that he resigned, and the peace process sets a timetable for free democratic elections. The next picture describe you can see a group of women with some material in her hand, and it says Liberian women register people, especially women and young people, to vote throughout Liberia. The next one is a picture of the first female president in Africa, as it described the election outcome. The next one is a picture that says ceasefire, and it described the event in which the rebels and the government negotiate a ceasefire in Ghana. The next one are candlelights, and the event is Liberian women hold a candlelight vigil in Monrovia. The next one, representatives of Women Mass Action for Peace meet with Liberian President Charles Taylor and pressure him to join peace talks in Ghana. The next one, Liberian women use a sex trade to pressure their partners to support peace. The next picture, which is the 10th, Liberian women hold a sit-in to surround the peace talks between the rebels and the government. The next one is a group of women, and it says community organizers in Liberia go door to door, recruiting women to join a group that will come to be known as Women's Mass Action for Peace. And the last one is a picture of Leima Bogi. I don't know how to pronounce that. Apologies. And it says, when police came to arrest the women blocking the doors to the negotiations in Ghana, Liberian women leader Lima Bobi threatens to remove her clothing, an act that will bring shame to men involved. So as you can see, all these different events are disorganized. So we invite you to organize them in the order that you think they happen. I think the 2 minutes have passed. And soon we are going to ask you to go into the breakout sessions to share the order in which you place them, and also explain why you think this was the order.
Shall I start the breakout sessions now, or do you want to wait a bit more? Okay.
Now we ask you to join the breakout group so you can share the results of the exercise. But remember, focus on why you organize them in the order you organize them. And this is the main issue we will be discussing in the session. you should be joining your breakout sessions. Now,
Hello?
hello?
Can you post breakouts again, please?
Yes, please. That would be good.
Okay.
Sorry, I couldn't reach break room. I don't know why.
Dana?
Okay.
I think
Yes,
it's
I resigned everyone to a breakout session. So actually, you should have received a pop-up message and you say accept, move to breakout session.
okay. Actually, I didn't receive.
Can you resend the pop-up, please?
Mm-hmm.
Please,
Who are
yes.
what's your name?
Wafa Gualem.
Michelle O'Donnell. Thank you. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
No problem.
And also for Joseph Elias, please.
I'm searching you.
Hi. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey.
We're gonna give you. Hold on.
Can someone go to breakout session 1? Someone is asking for help.
I didn't receive yet the pop-up. Ah, yes.
Resending them.
Yes, thank you.
Welcome. Nick, can someone of you go to breakout session 1?
Yeah,
Did
it
you
looks
hear
like
me?
Sabrine. Yeah, it looks like Sabrine is trying to join breakout session 1.
Okay, perfect.
But I don't know how. I didn't find the button.
Okay. You go to breakout sessions and then join.
Yeah,
Did you find it?
not yet.
Okay,
figure it
I'm
out.
soon done with sending those who look gray again an invite to join a session. If I'm done with that, I could do it as well.
Given the difficulties, let's give just 2 minutes so people that are in the breakout sessions can share. If not, also those that haven't been able to join a breakout session, maybe we can use just 2 minutes and you can share why, like if you have a particular order, why you organize them that way. What is your main takeaway of that exercise? Feel free to share in the chat, or also if you would like to share orally, you're welcome to.
I think actually someone is typing the whole time, just to let you know.
Yeah.
So looking at the time, I'm thinking that we maybe should call people back soon.
I could, if I close now, they receive a warning for 60 seconds.
Excellent.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Let's do that. Yep.
Yes.
Okay, I think we are getting everyone back from the breakout rooms. So thank you for indulging us in that exercise. We apologize that there was a little bit of a difficulty with some technical challenges with the breakout rooms, but we hope you at least had an opportunity to do some thinking, to engage with the link, and maybe have just even a short conversation during the breakout sessions. So, we will get to the answers. But first, we wanted to just have a look at a diagram that frames the theory behind the SNAP guide, and it'll actually help us to understand the sequencing of tactics during the mass action for peace. So the SNAP guide, again, that's Synergizing Nonviolent Action and Peacebuilding Guide. The SNAP guide uses adaptations of what is known as the curl diagram, which originates from Quaker nonviolent activist and peacebuilder Adam Curl. So as you can see in the slide, conflict transformation often passes through a variety of phases. And so the curl diagram includes 4 blocks of activity. So the lower left quadrant refers to contexts experiencing latent or hidden conflict. For example, some groups may be experiencing marginalization or discrimination, preventing their advancement in society. And so in these cases, there may be low public awareness of conflict, and some groups may have more power than others. And so conflict transformation in this stage starts with community organizing, coalition building, and capacity building to inform people about the issues at stake. So the next phase is overt or open conflict. So in this stage, there is a greater public awareness of conflict. Nonviolent action can bring conflict into the open and increase public awareness to persuade or pressure other groups to bring about social change by helping to shine a light on group grievances and changing the incentive structures of other groups. So
Nick, sorry, are you sharing your screen? Because some people don't see it, including me. Just making sure. Sorry for the interruption.
I should be. I'm not sharing the screen, but I should be showing the PowerPoint.
I see it.
Okay, so others see it. Okay, we see it. Okay, I'm seeing that some people see it. So I'm just going to keep going. And what we can actually do after the presentation, or even perhaps during, we can share a link to the actual snap guide, and the curl diagram is in that as well. So just to continue. So we have the third stage is conflict settlement. So in this phase, so nonviolent movements may have worked to balance power through nonviolent coercion or accommodation, which has leveled the playing field for the effective use of peacebuilding techniques such as dialogue, mediation, negotiation, to create a detailed agreement on how conflict will end and how new policies, structures, and leadership will be put into place. And the last stage illustrates the goal of reaching sustainable peace and justice. So when negotiations address the root causes of a conflict and policies and institutions are put in place that protect basic human rights and promote inclusive governance. So Sochal will discuss how this applies to Liberia.
Thank you, Nick. And thank you everyone also for enduring with us that exercise. And for those who didn't have time to complete the exercise, we're going to leave also the link of the game, and also feel free to play with it. And those who still have that link open in your computers, the solution should be showing now. And we will be sharing that. There you go. Thank you, Nick. You can just click where it says solution, and it's going to give you the list of the events in their order. If not, we can go back then to the curl diagram. Thank you, Nick. So if you can see what Nick was describing is pretty much the logic that unfolded in Liberia. And this is one of the examples that we like to quote because it explains really well the sequencing of a strategy that led to a sustainable peace agreement. So from at the beginning, you can see when there was latent conflict, the movement first formed, and they used dialogue to build their movement, to start doing canvassing and start building up members and including new people. And they employed low-risk nonviolent actions and tactics, like dressing all in white, like holding the candlelight, to bring awareness to the cause of the movement, and also to create that sympathy from the general population. That created a vision of who they were, and also it allowed them to build up their movement. Then during the open conflict stage, you can see that the movement gained more power and visibility. They used more confrontational tactics like the sex strike and the sit-in around the peace talks, which created their objective was different from building their movement. Their objective was putting pressure So those that were engaged in the peace talks will hear their voice and make sure that the peace talks took the path that everyone expected. As they sustained this pressure throughout the conflict, they first, of course, pushed President Taylor to join the peace talks in Ghana, and they also make sure that they sit in around those peace talks with the government. Those big peace talks, of course, led to the resignation of Chuck Taylor, but also around those peace talks, even in the moments that were more tense, the event of Lema showcased also another tactic that was not only nonviolent but also was rooted in the culture of Liberia. Because when when they were confronted with police that wanted to take them out of the city in which they were involved, then she threatens to take out her clothes, and that's because and that will bring shame to everyone there. So it was a nonviolent tactic that ensured that they could continue being there and putting pressure without resorting to violence. Finally, when the agreement was made, they didn't stop there. Their objective wasn't, changing a government or just for the ceasefire to happen. Their objective was ensuring sustainable peace. So they, as a movement, kept engaged and register and help more people participate in the elections, and the elections were held peacefully. So as you can see, that's kind of the logic behind the exercise, and there is a strategy behind it. Thank you, Nick.
Okay. Thanks, Xochitl. I apologize. I didn't realize my video had turned off. So I'm trying to turn that back on. But let's go ahead and keep moving. So just in summary, you can see here on the slide that nonviolent action supports peace building by increasing collective understanding of the root causes of a conflict and structural injustice, helps to balance power, and increases the urgency to resolving the conflict. And so conversely, peace building supports nonviolent action by building networks and coalitions that are necessary for movements, negotiating between conflict stakeholders, and preparing movement leaders to communicate clearly to citizens, maybe after the movement is complete. And so now I'll turn it over to Liz to talk a little bit more about the nonviolent action and peace building fields, the different fields of nonviolent action and peace building, and how they work together, need to work together.
Yeah, so thank you, Nick. So, in theory, nonviolent action and peace building, you think go hand in hand, and there shouldn't be any confusion or complication. But as we know, and we look at peace building programs all globally, nonviolent action in the programs that I have reviewed and been involved in, it's almost like it was kind of an accident that the peace building field kind of came to it and funded it. It wasn't something that is usually written into requests for proposals, donors. They don't think of it as this is a critical piece of peace building programming. So going back, to about 2016, AFP, USIP, and other organizations, the International Center on Nonviolent Conflict, we got together to say we have to change this because of the incredible research that USIP was doing to show that this was a critical piece of the puzzle in terms of working together. And the nonviolent action and the peace building field were really running in parallel tracks as distinct differences, distinct sectors. And that was the goal. The goal of all of this was to pull it together and pull it closer, and understand that, as nonviolent action is looking at governance issues are significant drivers of conflict. We know that, and we're both working on them, and we need to be able to be working on it closer together. So, both peacebuilding and nonviolent action share this commitment to social change, increased justice. So that is what we really want everyone to think about right now, is how do we make sure that when we are, as a donor, as policies, as programmers in the field, how do we make sure that we don't forget about nonviolent action, that we keep it front and center as a program or an activity or work or capacity building that also needs capacity building and funding. And just to show you, as an example of what I'm talking about, in the Casamance, as many of you know, it's one of the longest running, or was one of the longest running civil wars in Africa. And we were funding, I was working for an organization, we were funding programs in the Casamance, governance and conflict building programs. And I don't want to say we stumbled on it. I mean, this is going back many years ago, but you had women and youth movements that had significant pro-peace sentiments, and they had been growing. Now, again, I'm not saying that, the peace building field wouldn't started working with them, but it wasn't something that they intentionally did, that they thought about in the assessment, in the program description, in the conflict. The big issues that we see also within our conflict assessments, when we put them together, we focus so much on the analysis of what's the problem, what are the causes of conflict. We tend not to look at what can we do about it. And so that's really one of the most important pieces we want you to think about, is how do we make sure that these different communities are connected and how they are thought about in the assessment process. And, using the SNAP guide is just a phenomenal tool. I'm going to say one other thing about monitoring and evaluation. And if you've heard me talk before, I always do. It is critical to making sure that we can show that programs have had an impact, not just an output, like we trained this many people, that we are showing that we are able to reduce violence, build sustainable peace. It's really the way our field will move forward. Without it, the funding will always remain very small. So that's something, and this is a big part of the SNAP guide, and one that we have really focused on and made sure was a critical piece of it. So with that, I'll stop. Thank you.
Thanks, Liz. I appreciate that. And we will talk a little bit about the critical monitoring and evaluation piece in just a second. So what's in the SNAP guide, the Synergizing Nonviolent Action and Peacebuilding Guide? Well, I mean, the SNAP guide, as we've been discussing, has really, focuses on the synergy between the two complementary skill sets. So in this vein, there is a focus on nonviolent tactics and planning, creating, creative nonviolent tactics, as well as, more traditional peace building skills like negotiation, dialogue, and facilitation. But I think, what makes the guide interesting is that much of the guide focuses on conflict assessment and analysis and strategic planning, as these are foundational to successful nonviolent movements and peace-building processes. Oops, sorry about that. So, really just wanted to, just take a step back, but, and discuss, why is nonviolent action so critical to sustaining, to building, sustaining peace? And really, it's because of the evidence. We know that large-scale nonviolent movements are about twice as effective as violent campaigns. And while the average civil resistance campaign takes about 3 years, the average violent campaign takes about 9. And so in terms of building democracy, about 57% of successful nonviolent campaigns end in democracy after 5 years, while only 6% of violent campaigns, of insurgencies or violent campaigns. So in comparing, comparing the violence that's coming out of campaigns, the percentage of mass killings of nonviolent campaigns is about 23%. So it still happens, but it's 68% for violent campaigns. And the chances that a civil war will occur 10 years after a large-scale nonviolent campaign is about 28%. It's still there. It's still, it's not where we want it to be, but 43% for violent campaigns. So, I mean, that's just thinking about, the chance of a relapse of a civil war after a large-scale violent campaign is almost half. So, just a note. So, just a note here about, what makes nonviolent action successful. Really, I mean, the first thing is when movements can achieve mass participation. So nonviolent campaigns are on average about 11 times larger than violent campaigns. And really this is because movement leaders are able to grow numbers by choosing tactics that enable more people to participate, like banging pots and pans, sweeping streets, candlelight visuals, murals and other art-based activism. So nonviolent movements are also successful when they maintain nonviolent discipline. They're also successful when they invest in planning, when they do strategic planning, and that really harnesses assessment, sequencing of tactics, knowing when to escalate and innovate tactics. And so these indicators of healthy nonviolent movements can be built through training. And so that's kind of part of the reason why the SNAP program exists. So just wanted to give you just a brief overview of the SNAP program. We're working with partners in South Sudan, Latin America, Tunisia, Afghanistan, Sudan, Ethiopia to implement this program. In our SNAP program model, we work with our local partner to identify a cohort of SNAP facilitators, then go through an 8 to 10 day SNAP workshop and training their trainers. And so these workshops are contextualized so that participants are applying SNAP skills to real life issues that they're working on. And so at this stage, our primary objectives are increasing knowledge and skills and building relationships and networks among the participants. But after the initial workshop and training of trainers, we support the team of new SNAP facilitators to implement SNAP replication workshops in priority communities that they identify. And in several countries, as Liz alluded to, we are conducting a randomized control trial impact evaluation. And so to do this with the facilitators, we work with the facilitators to identify a priority list of municipalities to implement the SNAP workshops. Then we randomly assign half to a treatment group, so a group that will, municipalities that will receive a workshop, and half to a control group, a group that won't actually initially receive a workshop. And then we will monitor the treatment group along 5 skill indicators: knowledge, confidence in their skills, attitudes towards nonviolent action and peace building, behaviors in the field, and collaboration in their community. And so we do this monitoring through surveys and observations. And then, we ultimately, for ethical reasons, we will, after 6 to 8 months of surveying and observations, we do ultimately provide workshops to municipalities and the control group, just for ethical reasons, because, we think that SNAP workshops are valuable. So during and after replication workshops, we also provide coaching and mentoring on things like facilitation best practices, to campaign design as participants and begin to actually put the SNAP skills into use. And over the past few years, we've seen SNAP participants do some amazing things. For example, in South Sudan, the participants have started their own movement for peace and are engaging with rural communities through workshops and designing and implementing campaigns related to the ongoing peace process. But now I actually wanted to turn it over to Sabrine and Social to speak a little bit about what SNAP looks like in Tunisia and in Latin America.
Thank you, Nick. I think most of you or heard about the Arab Spring. If not, it was launched in Tunisia 10 years ago. Protests, demonstrations, and the Tunisian revolution started since December 2010 until January 2011. And since then, Tunisia has been witnessing 10 years of protests and demonstrations, sittings, hunger strikes, everything. We had an explosion of movements, syndicalist movements, unions, and it was adopted by the community that if we have put down a very dictatorship through demonstrations and protests, then we can also claim the revolution's objectives with protests and demonstrations. This has resulted hundreds, if not thousands, of protests and demonstrations over the years, over the 10 past years. People are claiming for the Tunisian revolution objectives, for development projects, for employment, sectorial demonstrations and protests all over the regions of Tunisia, and mostly even more in the south. So here, this is where the SNAP, this is how of these movements rely a lot on sittings, on the streets, on the field work. But when it comes to reaching agreements through negotiation or communication, or settling a negotiation or a dialogue process with the government, they rarely reach long-term outcomes. Their skills mostly are great in activism. However, the peace-building skills are lacking in such context. So what happens is that most of the movements either fail or aborted, or most of them reach very short-term outcomes. So thinking about SNAP and how to contextualize it as an abstract approach and tools to Tunisia, we didn't only contextualize the SNAP per country, but also per region and per group. Started by non-violent movements, because most of the movements in Tunisia were non-violent. The rate of using violence in demonstrations was already very low. The non-violent movement component was huge, and it's very well seen in their strategies, but they lack the strategic, they lack the communication skills. So then we identified multiple nonviolent movements in multiple regions in Tunisia, and we generally target harmonious groups, a harmonious group or a movement that work on the same cause, and we convene them to apply, and convene them when we ask them to apply the SNAP tools within the workshop. The intended outcome generally from the workshop is an action plan inspired by SNAP. So these movements, as you see in the they enter the workshop, and it's a 5 days workshop. They enter the workshop unstructured or informalized or kind of confrontational, and then they go through the few, let's say 5 days of coaching and mentoring with follow-ups and so on, to have them practice these tools within themselves as a group, to strategize their movement using strategic planning, and to also practice communication and negotiation skills, and also enhance and develop their tactics, their nonviolent movement tactics, to render them more creative and dynamic and more appealing to the wider community. So coming out from the SNAP workshop, we have a movement that strategized its strategy, its approach, it clarified its vision and mission, it clarified its strategic objectives, and now it's skilled with communication and negotiation skills. So after that, we generally follow up with them as a harmonious group working on the same cause. We follow up on their action plan inspired by SNAP. We provide further technical assistance, and then we capture success stories. I'll ask Nick to go to the next slide to show you some of them. Some of the success stories that we had is that we spotted one of the newly established organizations by doctors. We had doctors in Tunisia who are willing to reform the health sector. They have an advocacy plan in their mind. However, they have no idea about activism or how to do it, how to lobby, how to advocate, and or even how to negotiate or communicate with the government. They've gone through the SNAP workshop, and they developed an action plan inspired by SNAP. And from that action plan, they even received funding from Open Society Foundation. These are like one of the SNAP outcomes from our SNAP workshops, especially when they are well tailored and well contextualized, not only per country, but specifically for the needs of that specific movement or group. The second success story that I would like to share with you is for a movement that is much more confrontational and much more, it focuses a lot on field work. And I'll give you a bit of context regarding this. In the south of Tunisia, we have the Kamour movement. It's a movement that works and advocates for transparency over the management of natural resources. So over the past 4 years, it's accused the government of not managing well our natural resources and so on. There have been a lot of clashes, sit-ins, demonstrations, even hunger strikes. Some of them were targeted in one of our SNAP workshops this February 2020. And after that, in July, we confrontation happening between the protesters and between the policemen. What our SNAP participants did is that after 48 hours of tear gas, they found hundreds of tear gas leftovers and canisters in the street of Tataouine, a southern city of Tunisia, where all these clashes happened. And they thought, by being inspired by the SNAP workshop, and especially being inspired by using creative nonviolent actions to gather more sympathy over their cause instead of using violence, they have turned these tear gas into pots for plants, as you see here in the picture, and pots for even ice cream too, and decoration items. They didn't want to leave the pots in the streets, and they wanted to showcase a very interesting and moving message by bringing hope to the community, using creatively art and their imagination to bring hope back to the community and so on. I will leave it to these two success stories and turn it over to Social for more SNAP context in Latin America. But let me know what you think about these in the chat box. Thank you.
Thank you, Sabrine. I'll be quick because I'm eager to hear also your comments. The SNAP work in Latin America follows very similar the logic that Sabrine described that is being applied in Tunisia. But of course, we are very cognizant of the context differences and how culture, political, economic, and social elements kind of like change and demand an adaptation of what the SNAP approach offers. In Latin America, there is a deep history of violent conflict in all the countries in which we work. Historically, there has been very little participation of citizens in peace processes, with the maybe interesting exception of the recent peace accords in Colombia, where there was an actual mechanism. But the connection between activism and movements in Latin America isn't necessarily linked to possible peace processes and to possible negotiation dialogue processes that can come up with solutions to the issues that people protest about. But there is a growing citizen participation needing to increase mobilization all across the continent, with a lot of very ferocious protest movements that just in certain cases lead to particular concrete outcomes. And this also happens along with a strong but fragmented civil society, given that also at the more civil society spaces, there are tensions and fragmentation that doesn't allow people to mobilize in an articulated way. Next one, please, Nick. So the way that we adapted SNAP to this particular context is that we first wanted to understand how people saw activism, nonviolent activism, and also engagement in peace processes. So we pay a lot of attention into ensuring that the program was co-designed with our local partners. understanding and making sure that the activists and peace builders that are working in all this across the region have a say in how the methodology is adapted and how the methodology responds to the needs that they identified in the particular context. Also, the fact that this is a regional program allows for regional cross-pollination. That means, for instance, that activists that are coming from countries where there is so much protest, but not necessarily there has been a history of peace processes, can learn from other peace builders that probably have more experience in peace processes, and vice versa. Also, convening spaces for collaboration, because we understand that training spaces are not only spaces to acquire knowledge, but also to spaces to network, to learn from each other. And the trainings that we have been able to hold across the region have also been spaces where we strategically and intentionally invite groups that probably don't have the best working relationship. Of course, not necessarily involved in an overt conflict, but like the interest is to promote working together and learning together, so they can implement nonviolent action together. The local contextualization that I just mentioned, and also making sure that experiential learning is at the heart of the way in which SNAP is learned. And I must say that in Latin America, experiential learning in the form of it's a form of popular education that was advanced across the region and based on the pedagogy of Paulo Freire. The next one, Nick. Thank you. And I would like to just finish with this. Like in terms of the preliminary outcomes in what the skills we have been seeing in the participants of the SNAP workshops, we can see on the one hand an increased confidence of activists to engage in peace building. Before, for activists, like negotiation, dialogues, or mediated processes would feel, and they will tell us that they will feel those are processes that happen way outside of them, because activists are more citizen, grassroots people that are working in their communities or in their cities, and not necessarily get invited to the high-level, elite-driven peace processes that usually happen between governments and other actors. So by them offering them a space in which they can learn what a negotiation is about, what a mediated process should look like, not only they feel like they understand better these processes that happen at the higher level, but they are also more inclined and excited to combine those techniques and those skills with movement building, and also at the community level, and also how to sequence that with the nonviolent tactics that they already are engaging with. There is also an increased confidence in strategic planning, because sometimes people, like in movements, usually, as Sabrine mentioned also in Tunisia, just engage in activities just hoping that they can put pressure and that their voices are heard, but not necessarily there is a strategy behind it that they feel, okay, we want this person or this government to sit down and hear our voices and then possibly reach an agreement that actually addresses the issue that we are demanding or denunciating. So the fact that they are seeing more strategically and that they are able to build strategic plans showcase that they feel more comfortable in thinking in the medium and longer term, as opposed to how they were doing before. Also, we were able to watch the formation of coalitions at the territorial and community levels, groups that before weren't able to work on specific issues, feel more inclined after learning skills on how to de-escalate conflict, how to reach good negotiation outcomes, etc. After learning those skills, they feel more prepared to actually engage in coalition building, because before they wouldn't necessarily know what that would entail. Also, we like the fact that there has been a regional solidarity coming out of the process, showcase also the promising potential of the methodology in the region. I will leave there. And passing it on to you, Nick.
Okay, thanks so much, Social and Sabrine. Wanted to leave some time to answer some questions that you all have, and we also wanted to simultaneously, if you all just want to say, one word or just a few words about what you're taking away from today's session, feel free to just drop that in the chat box. But we did want to address some of your questions, and we've been monitoring your questions throughout the session. So I'll just read a few of these out, and then we can all of us we can take some time to answer. But the first question is, how do we change the violence in our culture? We allow such a low bar in the name of entertainment and so-called fun. So many individuals say it violates their personal rights to not be able to enjoy a video that normalizes violence. So what do we do? How do we show that it's not about legislating their values, but not normalizing violence? That is a really tough question, and I think one thing that at least from the kind of SNAP perspective, that I think the answer to that is contextual, based on where you're from, how your own individual culture sees violence and normalizes or doesn't normalize violence. I think for me personally, I immediately thought about kind of what can you do that that kind of provides an alternative to that. So, what kind of media content could you, if you had to say a peace movement or a nonviolence movement, what type of media content could you create that might, critique the system while at the same time not normalizing violence? But I don't know if Liz or Social or Sabrine want to take on that question.
Maybe the only thing that I would add is that from the SNAP point of view, nonviolent action that derives from the view of nonviolence, because the nonviolence view and approach is larger, like encompasses nonviolent communication and other forms of strategic nonviolence. But in this sense, when we speak about nonviolent action, we depart from the conception that conflicts are not to be just resolved, but they should be transformed in a nonviolent way, and they can be addressed in a nonviolent way. And pressure and power building is possible without resorting to violence. So in that sense, it does bring like a contrasting approach to what Raju is saying. So it also, at least in the people that we're working with, the fact that they engage in this trainings and learn more about what nonviolent action really entails, kind of convinces them that it's effective. It's not only an ideal or a positive thought; it's actually something that can resolve problems.
Mm-hmm. Great, thanks. A few additional questions. One, how can we participate in a SNAP training? Good question. I can answer this. So the first way, so we do have a SNAP online course that is free and open to the public. So if you go to the USIP Global Campus, and on that website, you can find out how to access the course. I'm actually not sure. I know there used to be a fee for that, and I think we're in the process of making that free to the public. The SNAP guide is also online, so probably the easiest way would be to just go to Google and type in Synergizing Nonviolent Action and Peacebuilding. That will take you to the program website, so you can access the PDF to the guide. In terms of actually participating in this SNAP workshop, we facilitate SNAP workshops in individual countries where we're kind of have programming focused. So it kind of depends on the country, but right now we're doing SNAP workshops in Sudan. So if you're interested in participating in a SNAP workshop in Sudan, there may be opportunities for that if you're Sudanese and you're joining us today. But we're also doing work obviously in Latin America and in Tunisia, but that's a little bit more program specific. Another question. So do you have any strategies for making sure nonviolent activists can stay safe, and how to mobilize international actor support in a non-politicized way? That's a really, really important question. Maybe Liz, would you have anything to say on this question?
I'm sorry, my connection had gone out. Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, no worries at all. I think that the heart of the question is how to mobilize international. How can international actors support maybe grassroots activists, nonviolent activists? How can external actors support them in a way that's not so politicized?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. And how do you do it, right? Because that's also one of the big issues we have even in conflict programming, that you want to, and peace building, you want to stay neutral. And one of the ways that, we work on it is that you fund programs. Let's say, I don't know, it's a Mercy Corps, or you're funding the programs in that area. You're funding local civil society that is seen as, trusted brokers in the community, that, for them to do the programming, for any internationalness to stay out of it. No branding. So you're really working on those capacity skills. And you don't always have to be working on the specific issue. And I'll just give you an example in Ethiopia. The Ethiopia law that was very draconian on civil society, this is going back many years, back to about 2007. What they had prohibited people from working on internationals was like children's rights or any kind of rights-based. So it's also another way to do it is to build capacity in one sector, because what you find is people apply the knowledge and the learning to other sectors. And that's why the Ethiopian government was so terrified. You're like, well, why do you care about disability rights? Like, why is that prohibited to work on? Why is it, prohibited to work on children's rights? That's not governance. That's not democracy promoting. But they understand that any capacity building in this area, you're building people's capacities. You're working with them to question and to understand, how to demand change. So those are just a couple of ways.
Yeah. Thanks, Liz. And Sabrina, did you have anything else to add on this?
Yeah, I was going to say that it depends on the context. So let's say if you are in a dictatorship, at the end of the day, everyone is exposed to being hunted by the government or security forces. But in contexts where there is a transitional democracy, such as Tunisia, to address this issue, when we work with a nonviolent movement, we would insert the SNAP component and working with the nonviolent movement in a context of a dialogue process, which means as an institute, we also reach out to the second party, which is generally the government. And we also propose negotiation, communication, active listening skills, and all of the peace building skills to have them trained on them. So they are not. So we remain always neutral, and we speak and interact and coach both parties to have them both ready. On the nonviolent movement side, we strategize and we build their capacity, but also on the government side, or even if it's an international oil company, then we also provide them with capacity building, so they are also ready and able to accept the SNAP approaches. But
Great.
in general, going for non-violent approaches is actually the safest option for activists, because you won't be legally hunted if you do creative non-violent initiatives.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Thanks, Sabrina. That's an excellent point. And I actually just dropped a link in the chat box on a report that we published a little over a year ago on donor assistance in the transparency and accountability movement. And that report speaks specifically to how can external actors best support nonviolent action on the ground without co-opting the movement or creating divisions over funding or whatnot. What are the best lessons that we learned from the field? I think maybe we just have time for one more question. We're a few minutes over, but we had a question on, what can be done when governments when they attack with brutal force, and when they attack peace movements with brutal force, and then they reference specifically in Lagos, Nigeria, with the recent INSARS peaceful protest. I can just speak a few words to this. I mean, one of the I think one of the principles that we kind of espouse to in SNAP workshops is that we don't necessarily advise on tactics. We don't tell participants what tactics are better. I mean, that is best. The answers to that question are best actually coming from the communities themselves. They know what tactics are best. What we can do is provide tools that will help them best plan, what those tactics are and what the kind of. And we can discuss kind of what the menu of tactics are, but it's up to the participants to actually select the tactics themselves. There is also a lot of really good research out there about backfire, and pretty much what that gets to is when governments respond to nonviolent protests with brutal force, and generally. That actually sometimes causes the movement to actually grow. And because people see the brutal force, and they realize, and it's obviously it's an unjust force, and that causes more people to join the movement. But conversely, if the movement were to respond in kind with some levels of violence, even small violence like rock throwing or whatnot, a lot of times people lose sympathy for the movement, and regimes using brutal force, that they might be more effective in that. Just before I end today, I wanted to pause to see if any of the other speakers had anything to say on that. Okay. Okay, so we are about 5 minutes over for today. So wanted to just thank you all for participating in today's discussion. I mean, this is 75 minutes is not really enough time, unfortunately, to really dive in. SNAP workshops, like we said, are usually about 5 days, but we hope this gave you just a little bit of a taste about what we do, and kind of really the value of nonviolent action to peace building, and how this can be and how nonviolent skills in nonviolent action can be cultivated to help move movements and to help transform conflict to places of just and sustainable peace. So thank you so much, and we hope that you have a great afternoon or evening wherever in the world you're calling it from. Thank you again.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Peace Builders. Wonderful people.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was awesome, everybody.
Thank you.
Good job.
Thank you.